Good morning. Today we will have a seminar on obstetric jaundice. Obstetric jaundice is a very important topic, both in respect of your theory exam and a case presentation. And we have a lot of surgical situations where obstetric jaundice is a presentation. So we will first start with Dr. Revant Thapre, who is second year PGT at Yambara District Hospital. We will talk on etiology and pathophysiological changes in patient with obstetric jaundice. Dr. Revant Thapre, you're always sharing screen, so
Yes.
please start.
Okay. Good morning, sir, and every other colleagues. My name is Dr. Revant Khapre. I'll be discussing on obstructive jaundice and physiological changes. Okay, I'm starting. Definition: post-hepatic causes leads to an impediment of flow of bile, which may either be due to partial or complete obstruction of extra hepatic biliary passages between the liver and the duodenum. There is predominantly conjugated hyperbilirubinemia. This is a characteristic feature of obstructive jaundice. Etiology of obstructive jaundice: biliary obstruction may be either intrahepatic or extrahepatic in origin. Intrahepatic cholestasis. Etiologies are hepatitis A, B, and C, leading to inflammation of liver with necrosis. Cirrhosis, that is primary biliary cirrhosis, leading to nodular regeneration and scarring. Extrahepatic biliary atresia. Drug-induced anabolic steroids and chlorpromazine, and space-occupying lesions of liver such as cysts, abscesses, and tumors. Extrahepatic: in extrahepatic, we have intraduodenal and extraduodenal causes. In intraduodenal causes, type 1 is complete obstruction. Examples are tumors of head of pancreas, ligation of CVD, cholangiocarcinoma, and parenchymal liver diseases. Type 2 is intermittent obstruction. Examples are choledocholithiasis, choledochal cyst, duodenal diverticulum, intrabiliary parasites, and hemophilia. Type 3 is chronic incomplete obstruction. Examples are strictures of CBD, stenosis biliary enteric anastomosis, chronic pancreatitis, stenosis of sphincter of Oddi. Type 4 is segmental obstruction. Examples are traumatic sclerosing cholangitis, intrahepatic stones, and cholangiocarcinoma. Extraductal causes are pancreatic head of tumors, cholangiocarcinoma, ampullary carcinoma, gallbladder carcinoma extending up to the CVD, metastatic lymphadenopathy, choledocholithiasis, biliary strictures, and malignant tumors are the most important and the common causes of obstructive jaundice. Some syndrome is seen in site-to-site choledochoduodenostomy, in which food stones and debris accumulate in the CVD and obstruct the normal biliary outflow. Roux-en-Y limb wherein stasis may cause biliary obstruction after biliary enteric anastomosis. There's also one thing is post-cholecystectomy choledocholithiasis, in which symptoms are patient may be asymptomatic but has bouts of pain, jaundice, and fever. The term cholangitis is given to the triad of pain, jaundice, and fevers, also known as Charcot's triad. Signs are tenderness may be elicited in epigastrium and right hypochondrium. Crossevier's law: in obstruction of CVD due to stone, distension of gallbladder seldom occurs. The organ is usually shriveled. In obstruction from other causes, distension is common by comparison. However, if there is no disease in the gallbladder and obstruction is due to cancer of ampulla, pancreas, or bile duct, then the gallbladder may be distended. Then the physiological changes due to obstructive jaundice. In case of liver, there is increased intraductal pressure. Due to absence of bile acids, bacterial overgrowth occurs, leading to cholangitis, which eventually accumulates to septic shock. Alteration of liver generation, damage and mitochondrial dysfunction, which has a combination strongly sensitized to apoptosis. Long-standing biliary obstruction leads to secondary biliary cirrhosis. The net result of gross hepatic dysfunction is endotoxemia. Then changes in liver system. Reduction in peripheral vascular resistance resulting in systemic hypotension, depression of myocardial function, profound natriuresis and diuresis leading to volume depletion, pre-renal failure, and acute tubular necrosis. Higher concentration of circulating endotoxins has deleterious effects on both the peripheral and the renal microcirculation. Then the physiological and pathological changes in the coagulation system. Due to the absence of bile in the intestine, vitamin K cannot be absorbed, leading to its deficiency. Glycosylation of lysyl residues cannot take place in the liver, thereby leading to deficiency of factor 2, 7, 9, and 10. Septic and pancreatic complications develop when developed, then causes a prothrombotic state, which may develop initially. Mucinous adenocarcinoma of pancreas and hepatocellular carcinoma can induce activation of hemostatic system. An unresolved cholestasis, that is chronic cholestasis, may lead to thrombocytopenia, decreased synthesis and clearance of coagulation factors and inhibitors, dysfibrinogenemia, hyperfibrinolysis, DIC, portal vein stasis, and thrombosis. Then the changes in intestinal manifestations. Absence of bile in the intestine has a series of deleterious effects leading to septicemia. Bile acids inhibit the growth of certain bacteria such as Bacteroides, Clostridia, Lactobacillus, and Streptococci. In the absence of bile ducts, absence of bile acids causes overgrowth of gram-negative bacteria. Alteration of the intestinal tight junction expression and increased intestinal apoptosis, causing significant alteration in the intestinal oxidative state, thereby exacerbating the gut injury. Increased intestinal permeability, causing bacterial and endotoxin translocation, lead to septic and renal complication. Abscess of bile causes suppression of clearing capacity of Kupffer cell, thus permitting spillover of the endotoxin from the portal circulation into the systemic circulation, which with the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. These lead to development of gut-derived sepsis. Then CNS manifestations are long-standing jaundice leads to formation of pseudotransmitter, which predispose to pre-coma and finally into hepatic coma. Done, sir. Not audible, sir.
Yes. Go to the etiology part of your description. There is some overlapping. You see, what I'm trying to say is you have divided this into intrahepatic and extrahepatic. Extrahepatic means you have made a subclass intraductal.
Yes, sir. Intraductal.
If you talk of intraductal,
okay, sir.
One may be in the lumen of the duct.
Yes, sir.
In the wall of the
Intraluminal,
duct, and outside the duct.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
These are getting overlapped because if we say intraductal, a stricture in the CBD cannot be intraductal. This is
luminal.
And this transmural.
Yes, sir. Transmural, sorry.
Chronic pancreatitis cannot be intraductal. Got my point?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Because again, you have mentioned next part is CA pancreas is this. So this intraductal causes maybe either intraluminal like a CBD stone.
Yes, sir.
A worm.
Yes, a worm. Ascaris.
Immobilia.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then if you go to the intramural part, that is biliary stricture, cholangiocarcinoma.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then stenosis biliary anastomosis. And then you go to the extraductal again.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So in extraductal mentioning again cholangiocarcinoma. You see, if it is cholangiocarcinoma arising from the bile duct wall, this is not extraductal.
Okay.
A cholangiocarcinoma from the bile duct wall is not extraductal. A cholelithiasis is not extraductal. Got my point?
Yes, sir.
You mentioned same etiology in the earlier part. Again, extraductal mentions the cholelithiasis.
Yes, sir.
Cholelithiasis cannot be a extraductal cause of obstruction. Okay.
So actually, yes.
So you should keep in mind how you are describing this system. And once you start describing these other changes, actually I was not in favor of the heading itself. It's not all physiological change. Physiology is a normal change in the body. So once you have obstructive jaundice, what you have described all are pathophysiological changes. So there is a pathology and there are some pathophysiological changes.
Okay.
Next. Okay. Once you are having a situation of obstructive jaundice, and what happens is the first is the obstruction in the extrahepatic biliary system.
Yes, sir.
So the basic thing that happens is there is no flow of bile to the GIT.
Hmm.
And this stagnant bile refluxes into the portal circulation and then
Portal
to systemic
circulation.
circulation.
Yes, sir.
That is a basic pathological change.
One pathology. Yes, sir.
And in the renal system, one of the important consequence of this obstructive jaundice is even after treatment, and this patient may go into a term called hepatorenal syndrome.
Yes, sir. Hepatorenal.
Yes, so that in the renal system, it's not a individual system description itself. It can be a situation that these are the patient in the post-op period may undergo a complication with hepatorenal syndrome. That means the patient has got both features of hepatic failure
Heparin and renal failure.
Renal failure. And what are the important mechanism which leads to this hepatorenal failure?
That I don't know, sir.
One is if the patient, these are the patient who are chronically dehydrated.
Okay.
If you operate on a patient who is chronically dehydrated, they are the patient who may go into a shock, number one.
Okay.
They are the patient who are chronically septic. You said that there are a lot of changes occurs which leads to sepsis. One is normal bile may contain some flora, but
yes,
they are
overgrowth
not
of flora.
Normal bile may contain some flora which are not pathogenic in under normal circumstances. One, there is stagnation, there is obstruction. This flora in the bile become pathogenic. And one important consequence of obstructive jaundice is cholangitis. This ascending infection. So you should have to clearly mention that. You mentioned about sepsis, but
yes, sir.
This sepsis is specifically described as acute cholangitis.
Yes, sir.
And acute cholangitis, you said there is a triad. And that triad happens when the patient has got acute cholangitis. And once this acute cholangitis is further complicated with septicemic shock, then this patient may have what we call it Raynaud's pentad.
Raynaud's phenomenon.
Raynaud's phenomenon. This Raynaud's pentad. That pentad. In addition to these three features, patient has neuropsychiatric
neurological,
neuropsychiatric manifestation and shock.
Yes.
So these are not individual system wise. These are all overlapping. Okay. So we have described the changes in each of the system, but these systems are overlapping. And once you have a patient who has got this, come to the coagulation system. Yes. So once you are talking of these coagulation system changes, one of the reason for coagulation failure is just simple obstructive jaundice, and then this obstructive jaundice is leading to failure of absorption of vitamin K and K-dependent factors. That is one mechanism.
Yes, sir.
In long-standing obstructive jaundice, patient may have associated hepatocellular dysfunction.
Okay.
So in most of the cases of obstructive jaundice, you can correct this coagulation failure by giving just exogenous vitamin K injection.
Yes, sir.
But if the patient has got associated hepatocellular dysfunction, this may not be corrected by simple admission of vitamin K. That indicates patient has got associated hepatocellular dysfunction. This dysfunction does not come at the beginning of obstructive jaundice. This happens, you say, late phases, patient have secondary cirrhotic changes, like secondary biliary cirrhosis.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so subsequently, secondary biliary cirrhosis may lead to hepatocellular dysfunction. So how will you correct that situation? In that case, you have to give the patient fresh frozen plasma. Only vitamin K may not be a factor for altering this. So they are all overlapping. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And the neural system is, go to neural system. Yes. Why these neural changes occurs? Why this patient has some CNS manifestations? What we said is this formation of pseudotransmitters. One important cause again is sepsis. Sepsis. So it's not only hepatic precoma and hepatic coma. This sepsis can affect the central nervous system. Apart from the patient having hepatic precoma or coma. Okay. Okay. Thank you. So
Thank you.
you can put a question in the chat box. We can discuss those also.
Okay.
The next speaker will be Dr. Anish, who will speak on investigations. I mean the diagnosis of
Yes.
patient having obstetric jaundice. You see,
Yes.
we have an idea now about the important etiological factors, and now we are going to discuss about the how to come to diagnosis. You should always keep in mind that diagnosis will rest on number of steps. Okay,
Yes.
Dr. Anish, please.
Yes. Hello.
Yeah, please.
Sir, is my screen visible?
No,
Hello.
Dr. Anish's screen is not visible.
Allowed sharing.
Yes.
Sir, one.
We will answer Dr. Deepak Shah's question afterwards. Okay, let Anish finish up.
Sir, 1 minute.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, in the meantime, Dr. Ravan, can you answer this question in the chat box? What is the mechanism of pruritus in patient having obstetric jaundice? Ravan?
Sir, yes, sir.
Yeah. Someone has asked, what is the mechanism of pruritus in patient obstetric jaundice? That is a very intractable symptom.
So when the bile goes and gets accumulated in the superficial skin, sir, then the
Bile. Is the bile accumulated there?
no, sir.
What happens? What happens to the bile that is stagnant in the biliary tree? I said that there is a stagnation of bile and some amount of get absorbed.
Yes, sir.
What is absorbed? Why is this patient having pruritus? The bile salts.
Bile salt, sir. Bile
The
salt.
bile salts are getting
Salts.
deposited in the elastic tissues in
Elastic
the periphery,
Yes, sir.
and that causes activation of some cytokines and histamines.
Yes, sir. That's why, sir, pruritus.
These cytokines and histamines are responsible for the itching that
Itching.
comes up in patient obstetric jaundice. So this is the cytokines and histamine released
Histamine.
in the tissues in response to local irritation by bile salts.
Bile salt, sir.
Ranish, have you presentation? No. Yeah.
Sir, I'm not able to share, sir. Wait, sir. Sir, for 5 minutes only, sir.
Dr. Anish, you can send me your presentation.
Yeah, I'm sending you. Please.
কোথায়
Just
দেখি
mail and
To join this.
এই যে
Hello, sir. Is it visible?
not yet. You've gone to the sharing of screen option.
Yes, sir.
Then you should open up. We have allowed you. You have sent it to Milind email.
Sir, sending, sir.
Send kar do. You can share from here.
Getting difficulty, sir.
Dr. Anish, your blind screen is visible. Are you sharing that?
Wait. Actually,
You open up your presentation on the screen.
sir.
Screen to on.
Sir, visible?
If the blank screen is visible, come to the presentation part. We open up the presentation.
तो डेस्कटपে শিফট করতে এই ফাইলটাকে তাই ডেস্কটপে শিফট কর তাই এক মিনিট আগে বল আগে ডেস্কটপে শিফট
Anish, you could open up your presentation in your desktop. Then you can just it's open there. We can.
Yes, sir. I don't know why it's not visible.
Anish,
Yes, sir.
is there in your screen now?
Sir, I had sent to Dr. Milind, sir.
Okay, I'll just check.
Anish, you can see our screen?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You can see?
Yes, sir.
So you can please start. Milind will
Yes, sir.
keep on changing. Okay.
Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. Sorry, sir, for the late, sir.
No problem. This happens.
Good morning to all of you, respected sir, respected seniors, and my dear colleagues. Today, I'm going to present the topic on the obstructive jaundice, basically covering the investigations and the pre-op preparations. Sir, I'm audible?
Yes, very much. Carry on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Please change. The aim of the investigation should be the detection of the disease, assessment of the severity, assess prognosis, assess effect of the therapy, recurrence, or follow-up. Now, the basic question we faced during our investigations are, is it obstructive jaundice? Where is the obstruction? What is the cause of the obstruction? Whether it is benign or malignant condition. So here is the algorithm for the patient with the jaundice. Basically, we start with the history, physical examination, and the lab test. If there is isolated elevation of the bilirubin, there is an indirect hyperbilirubinemia or direct hyperbilirubinemia. There is isolated elevation, means there is no other parameters raised in the LFT. There is only elevation of the bilirubin. So it is indirect, means when the indirect component is more than 85%, which may be due to the drugs, inherited disorders, and hemolytic disorders. And when the direct component is more than 15%, it will be direct hyperbilirubinemia, which may be due to the inherited disorders. And when if there is a increase in the bilirubin, and also there is increase in the other parameters like ALT and the AST or alkaline phosphatase, there is a cholestatic pattern. Means this is our domain of discussion, that is obstruction. It may be the intrahepatic or it may be the extrahepatic. While intrahepatic occurs, then there is a raised ALT and AST, but not ALP. And if there is extrahepatic, there is a raised there is increase in the ALT and AST, along with there is a increase in the ALP or GGT. So change the slide. So we start with the history. The points to be considered in the history for the diagnosis or for the for our focus will be pain abdomen, abdominal fullness, fever with chills and rigor, vomiting, yellowish discoloration of eyes and urine, its duration and progression, whether patient is passing clay colored stool or black tarry stool. We ask for generalized body itching. We ask for nausea, anorexia, significant weight loss, alcohol and any drug history, and any history of blood transfusion. Change the slide. We go for the general examination. We carefully look for the consciousness of the patient. We look for the build of the patient. We look for the nutrition status of the patient. We look for the pallor. We look for the icterus. We look for the edema, and we look for the lymphadenopathy. We go for the per abdomen examination. We look for the shape and contour of the abdomen, any visible or palpable lump, hepatomegaly, splenomegaly, ascites, scratch marks. Now we come to the liver function test. The liver function test for the diagnosis of the jaundice consists of basically these parameters. We look for the serum bilirubin, AST, ALT, ALP, gamma glutamyl transferase, prothrombin time, and the albumin. We come to the bilirubin. Bilirubin exists in the two forms. It's direct bilirubin and the indirect bilirubin. The normal range mentioned here, we say conjugated hyperbilirubinemia is the hallmark of the obstructive jaundice. And conjugated hyperbilirubinemia is defined as the elevation of the conjugated bilirubin to more than 15% of the total. Change this one. Now these three liver enzymes, ALT, AST, and ALP. ALT is an enzyme found in the liver that helps to convert proteins into the energy for the liver cells. AST is an enzyme that helps to metabolize amino acids. ALP is the enzyme that helps to break down proteins. Alkaline phosphatase plays a particularly important role in LFT and bone development. Basically, the normal range of these two ALT and AST and ALP basically is less than 30 units per liter, and it depends upon the lab where it has been tested. ALT and AST is basically the outcome of viable hepatocytes. It shows how many hepatocytes are viable in the liver. Change the slide. Now we come to the AST and the ALT-ALP interpretation. We have abnormal liver function test. There will be two patterns, hepatocellular pattern and cholestatic pattern. Hepatocellular pattern means there is ALT or AST more than ALP, and cholestatic pattern means ALP is more than ALT or AST. Hepatocellular pattern may be severe, moderate, or mild as depending upon the level of ALT. So there is a ALT more than 15% of upper normal limit, moderate ALT 5 to 15 of upper normal limit, and mild ALT less than 5 of upper normal limit. Okay, the causes are mentioned here, and in the cholestatic pattern, the ALP is more than ALT and the AST. Change the slide. Now this is the GGT in obstructive jaundice. This is also one enzyme which is raised in the obstructive jaundice. The normal range is 10 to 15 units per liter. It is membrane-bound glycoprotein which catalyzes the transfer of gamma-glutamyl group to the other peptides and amino acid. Very useful in the diagnosis of obstructive jaundice. The main important is that it is not elevated in bone disease, as unlike alkaline phosphatase, which may be elevated in the case of bone diseases. It is a microsomal enzyme. Serum GGT is highly elevated in the obstructive jaundice. Now we come to the differential diagnosis of the jaundice. We have three types of jaundice: prehepatic, intrahepatic, and posthepatic. The conjugated bilirubin is high in intrahepatic and the posthepatic, while unconjugated bilirubin will be high in the prehepatic. The AST and the ALT is normal in prehepatic, while it is increased in intrahepatic and the posthepatic. But the but the amount of AST and ALT increase is more in intrahepatic as compared to the post-hepatic. And alkaline phosphatase will be normal in prehepatic. It is normal in prehepatic, or and it is increased in the post-hepatic. Urine bilirubin is absent in prehepatic cases, and in intrahepatic and post-hepatic cases, urine bilirubin is present. Urine urobilinogen is present in prehepatic cases and intrahepatic, while it is absent in the post-hepatic cases. Next slide. Post-hepatic cases, obstructive joint. This is also another I have mentioned. Unconjugated indirect bilirubin will be normal. Conjugated direct bilirubin will be increased. AST, ALT increased. ALP and GGT markedly increased. And there is albumin globulin ratio is deranged in case of the obstructive jaundice with chronic disease. Now, imagine in case of the obstructive jaundice. The primary aim of imaging is confirm presence of obstruction, level of obstruction, cause of obstruction, complementary information relating to the underlying diagnosis, guide to the best therapeutic approach. Imagine algorithm. First and the foremost, we go for the ultrasound, and we look for the dilated bile duct, suspected mass, suspected bile duct neoplasm, or suspected infection. If there is a dilated bile duct which may be due to the bile duct stone or no cause found. If bile duct stone, then we go for the ERCP for the management also. And if there is no cause found, we assume suspected stone, and then we go for MRCP or MRI to confirm the presence of the stone. If there is a suspected mass, we go for the CT, and or we can go for the endoscopic ultrasound or biopsy. If suspected bile duct neoplasm, we go for the MRI or MRCP, and if suspected infection, we can go for the ERCP or percutaneous transhepatic cholangiography. Okay, next. Now we start with the USG. USG is the most useful non-invasive, reliable and quick investigation for obstructive jaundice. Dilated biliary radicals, both intrahepatic and extrahepatic, can be demonstrated. Stones can be diagnosed with their posterior acoustic shadow. CBD size, wall thickness, any calculi, any mass can be detected. About pancreas, mass, chronic pancreatitis, pancreatic duct, any calculi can be detected. Any adjacent lymph node can be detected. The basic disadvantage is that ultrasound is highly operator dependent and requires skill and experience to produce consistently good result. So here we are seeing the gallbladder, ultrasound of gallbladder, ultrasound of whole abdomen, showing liver, gallbladder, hepatic artery, common bile duct. In the next image, we will see the gallbladder, liver. Stone is shown by the posterior acoustic shadow, and in the third image, we are seeing there is a mass in the gallbladder. Okay, next. In the CT scanning, it is not very helpful in the diagnosis of the stone diseases. Triphasic helical CT and 3D reconstruction provides better delineation, useful for better evaluation of cancer of gallbladder, bile duct, or pancreas. Extent of the growth, presence of lymph node, any distant metastasis can be detected. Next. The limitations of this CT scan is inability to detect small hepatic metastasis, lymph nodes, metastasis in the normal size nodes, and intraductal tumor extent. Main disadvantages include contrast-induced nephropathy. This is a CT scan. We are seeing the different structures. We basically concern of head of the pancreas, common bile duct, and here's the right hepatic flexure. And these are the basically what we look for. CT scan, body of the gallbladder, second part of the duodenum. Here we are seeing a hyperechoic lesion in the head of the pancreas. This may be due to the cancer of the head of the pancreas. Next. Now we go for the ERCP. ERCP is endoscopic retrograde cholangiopancreatography. With the help of the side viewing endoscope, ampulla of water is cannulated and a radio-opaque dye is injected. It fills up the biliary and pancreatic system. Stones appears as filling defects. A periampullary carcinoma gives rise to total cutoff in the flow of the dye. Sedation requires for this process. Next slide. Bile can be collected for culture and sensitivity and for looking for the malignant cells. Brushing may be taken for the bile duct. Endoscopic inspectotomy may be done. Stones for the CBD extraction by using a Dornier basket catheter can be done. Bile duct may be stented for the relief of the jaundice during this process. Here it is a diagrammatic representation of the ERCP. Here we are seeing the CBD with multiple filling defects, which may be due to the CBD stones. Next. MRCP. MRCP is accurate in demonstrating the presence and level of the biliary obstruction CBD stones. Now it is a standard technique of biliary imaging. Clear outline of biliary tree can be observed. Major advantage is it is non-invasive, doesn't require sedation. Major disadvantages is its lower resolution, lack of immediate therapy for the obstruction as available in the ERCP. Some patient may have claustrophobia, inability to evaluate the patient with pacemaker or ferromagnetic implants. This is the MRCP of the biliary tree. We are seeing the clear picture of the biliary radicals, gallbladder, CBD, and associated structures. Next. Now we come to the EUS, endoscopic ultrasonography. Use a small frequency ultrasound probe mounted on the tip of the endoscope. Can detect the missed stone in the CBD, pancreatic head mass, lymph nodes. Endoscopic guided cytology can be done to look for the malignancy. Limitations of endoscopic ultrasonography includes high operator dependency, equipment cost, inability to provide immediate relief for obstruction as can be done in the ERCP. Next slide. This is the endoscopic ultrasonography showing gallbladder, EUS probe, duodenal wall, CBD, and the liver. Next. Now we come to the percutaneous transhepatic cholangiography. Using ultrasound image intensifier, a dilated biliary radical is identified, a Chiba needle introduced into it, and a radio-opaque dye is injected. Useful in the diagnosis of high strictures, ERCP failure cases. Can delineate the dilated proximal ducts which helps in planning for a biliary enteric anastomosis. Catheter can be kept in bile ducts for external drainage. Prothrombin time should be normal, and antibiotic if there is a cholangitis we have to give before this procedure. Next, this is a diagrammatic representation of how we perform the PTC. We have introduced the needle, and this drainage system has been introduced here for the drain of the bile. This is percutaneous transhepatic biliary drainage. Next, spyglass cholangioscopy, a new development in the biliary imaging. Spyscope is inserted through the ERCP channel, can visualize the interior of the bile duct. It has therapeutic intervention. Next. This is the diagrammatic representation of the spyglass cholangioscope. Spyglass cholangioscope with catheter tip with forceps for tissue acquisition. Spyglass scope catheter tip with EHL for the stone management, and spyglass DS scope catheter tip with laser for the crushing of the stone of the CBD. Next. Operative choledocoscopy. During cholecystectomy, a flexible choledocoscope introduced to the cystic bile duct. Stone is seen and removed under direct vision. In the retained CBD stone with T-tube in situ, the matured T-tube tract may be used for the introduction of the choledocoscope, and stone extraction under vision can be possible. Next. This is the previous slide, please. This is the choledocoscope, and we introduced through the cystic or bile duct, and we see the CBD stone, and under vision we remove it with the help of this instrument. Next. Radioactive scanning. 99 technetium labeled HIDA scan is used. Excreted in the bile. Images will be visualize the biliary tree, useful in the assessment of the bilioenteric anastomosis. In acute cholecystitis, gallbladder is not visualized. Next. This is the HIDA scanning. Here we introduce the dye through the IV channel, and we look for the flow of the bile through liver and biliary tree. Here it is coming in the left hepatic and right hepatic duct, and here it is coming in the gallbladder. So by this we are looking for the normal flow, and if there is a stricture or any obstruction to the flow, the bile will not flow down to the as normal pathway. Next. Now we come to the pre-op preparations. Sir, may I proceed?
Yes. Carry on.
Now we come to the pre-op preparations. For the after the diagnosis, we go for the intervention. So before going intervention, we go for the pre-op preparations. We go for routine blood test. Apart from LFT, we go for the routine blood test, CBC, PTINR, or renal function test, and sugar profile, viral serology, urine routine examination. And we go for CA 19.9 if suspecting carcinoma pancreas or gallbladder, ECG, X-ray chest, and echo as per requirement. Next. Now we prepare the patient for the surgery or any intervention. As discussed earlier, patient is usually anemic, so we consider pre-op blood transfusion as per protocol. And there is a liver dysfunction, so as glycogen reserve is reduced, consider giving oral glucose if patient can take, otherwise consider giving IV. Patient usually have chronic dehydration as discussed by sir and impaired renal function, so we correct it by giving IV fluids. As sir has discussed, there is a coagulation profile defect, so we give injection vitamin K for 5 to 7 days before operation, or if there is a severe coagulopathy, we give fresh frozen plasma as discussed by sir. IV antibiotics to prevent infection, oral neomycin or lactulose to prevent hepatic encephalopathy or to excrete the product, and enteral or parenteral nutrition as per requirement, chest physiotherapy. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Good presentation by Dr. Anish, and you have correctly gone through the steps. You see, in fact, in the exam, if you have a question on how to investigate a patient, always keep in mind that investigation also will include the clinical evaluation. So any investigation for a particular disease will also evaluate either clinically. He has rightly gone to the history and examination of the patient, and then you come to the basic investigations. Means the basic lab investigation followed by imaging. So he has correctly given the algorithm. But keep in mind that when you talk of you talked of the clinical examination of the patient in a patient of obstructive jaundice.
Yes.
What is the implication of getting a patient that patient has got a splenomegaly?
Sir,
What is the implication that patient has got associated splenomegaly and patient has got obstructive jaundice?
Sir, maybe associated with the portal hypertension due to the splenic vein thrombosis,
Yes.
which may cause the portal hypertension,
or even
which
portal
results
vein
in
obstruction. Or
Yes, sir.
you see, some cause obstructive jaundice can cause portal vein compression or invasion.
Yes,
So in that case, if finding splenomegaly means you should always keep in mind that patient has portal hypertension. So this
Yes.
patient will need evaluation for portal hypertension also.
portal hypertension.
Second is, as you made the algorithm of once you do ultrasound, basic
Yes.
invasive ultrasound, come to that.
Yes, sir.
And ultrasound will guide you to the next level of investigation. Once you say that ultrasound shows dilated bile ducts and you can demonstrate bile duct stone, in
Yes.
that case, there is no role for doing a diagnostic ERCP. If you have a diagnostic of bile duct stone and if you want to reconfirm it, the next image should be MRCP. ERCP is for therapy. You don't do
ERCP for
now diagnostic ERCP. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So ERCP will be here, can be taken as both diagnostic and therapeutic, but only for diagnostic, don't do ERCP.
Okay, sir.
Okay. And
Okay.
this neuromodular EUS. EUS is a very important neuromodulator investigation, although it is operator dependent, but EUS scores about CT and MRI for diagnosis of smaller lesions. If you have a very small lesion in the pancreatic ampullary region and
Yes.
distal bile duct, they are very easily picked up by a good quality of EUS.
Yes.
And then it come to PTC. Again, it said PTC. PTC is again an investigation where diagnostic PTC is not practiced now.
Yes.
Because with advent of MRCP, you can
MRCP.
see the whole biliary tree.
Yes, sir.
And now PTC is only applicable when you consider doing a parkinson biliary drainage.
Training.
Then you do PTC followed by PTBD. Only for diagnostic purpose, PTC is not favored now
Not.
because
Yes.
it's now being replaced by your MRCP or
Yes.
by good quality EUS.
Yes.
Okay. So otherwise, we have gone through this clearly. And in ultrasound, one thing should be emphasized is, you said, although it is operator dependent, but ultrasound is not a reliable investigation for picking up bile duct stones. Why? Why all bile duct stones cannot be picked up by ultrasonography?
Sir, in distal, sir, if the patient is too fatty or
Yes, one is
if
obese
the
patient,
yes,
where you
sir,
have
and if
poor window. Second
yes,
is
sir.
the retroduodenal part of
Yes,
ultrasound,
sir.
the CVD, where you
CVD,
have
yes,
a
sir.
gas interface.
Yes.
Once interface of gas is difficult to interpret the distal CVD. So
Yes.
only in 15 to 20% cases, ultrasound can pick up CVD stone. So
Yes.
once you have a suspicion of CVD stone, you should resort to the other investigation. That is the limitation of ultrasound. In addition to the operator dependent,
Yes.
this cannot be a very reliable mode of investigation for evaluating CVD stones.
Yes.
And then you talked of cholangioscopy. That now even when cholangioscopy can come as short notes. So you should have to have a little more idea about the cholangioscope. So
Okay.
cholangioscopy is a newer modern investigation where you can enter with a scope directly into the bile duct. In ERCP scope, you keep the scope in the duodenum.
Ample of, yes.
And then you inject contrast and visualize the bile duct. In this cholangioscopy, what do you have a baby scope? You see, the other, this wider one is the baby scope. And
Yes.
that scope we introduce the ERCP channel and then manipulate this baby scope into the bile duct. So you can visualize the interior of the bile duct. That is the advantage of cholangioscopy over a standard ERCP. In ERCP, you see the ductal system indirectly by injecting contrast.
Yes.
But in cholangioscopy, you push this camera system into the biliary tree. So you can take, earlier, it was not possible to take biopsy from the bile duct lesion by using a standard ERCP scope. You could have taken brushing or the cytology. But with the cholangioscope, you can take biopsy from the bile duct lesion.
Yes.
You can directly see the stone and manipulate the stone down into the duodenum by using a cholangioscope. So this is a step ahead of ERCP.
Yeah. Yes.
And you have rightly mentioned about the role of HIRA scanning. You see, HIRA scanning is not routinely practiced. Earlier, when the ultrasound was not there, HIRA scanning was important investigation for acute cholecystitis, where there is edema of the cystic duct and this radioactive substance was not going to the gallbladder. So, absence of gallbladder was taken as the indirect evidence of acute cholecystitis. But with the advent of other good investigation, we don't rely on the radio scanning. The only role for radio scanning is assessing your biliary enteric anastomosis in the post-op period, where you can see the clearance of this radioactive substance into the biliary system. And once you come to the preparation, you see, you should keep in mind that once you are going for preparation of any patient, we have some general preparation for a elective major surgery.
Yes.
So this general preparation will hold good for patient after jaundice. So there are some general preparations. That means you evaluate the patient by taking history about any coagulation disorder, any other associated pulmonary or cardiac disease, and that needs evaluation. Number one. Number two, patient having obstructive jaundice needs some special preparation. That he has discussed. Next, that we have discussed details. So specifically about the jaundice patient is our idea is to prevent development of hepatorenal syndrome in the post-op period. And these are the important components. You have to build up this patient. The patient is anemic. If it's less than 8 milligram gram percent of hemoglobin, you should give the blood transfusion. Patient is having poor nutrition. You consider giving the patient an extra oral diet, or if the time is not available, you should give the patient parenteral nutrition.
Yes.
And then correct the coagulation abnormalities by giving vitamin K. And as I said, if there is associated hepatocellular dysfunction, you might need to give the patient a fresh frozen plasma. Okay. So these are the usual preparations. So you have nicely covered. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Anish. We pass on to the last part. Again, the management is a big topic, and obviously the management of the obstructive jaundice will depend on the underlying cause. So I would ask Snehashish to give, you don't give the very depth because each item will be discussed separately. So give an overview of this outline for management of patient obstructive jaundice. Snehashish is second year PGT at IPGMR SKM Hospital. So Snehashish, please start sharing your screen.
Sir, am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are audible.
Sir, shall I start screen sharing?
Yes, yes, please.
Sir, is my screen
Yes,
visible,
yes,
sir?
yes. Carry on. Start.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Sneha Shah, second year PGT of IPGMN and SSKM Hospital, and I'll be presenting the third part of today's seminar, Management of Obstructive Jaundice. As my earlier colleagues have already pointed out, there is an extensive list of causes of obstructive jaundice. In this, I'll be only discussing about the commonly encountered uh, causes of obstructive jaundice and their management in daily surgical practice. Now, among the common causes, they can be divided into benign causes and malignant causes. Among benign causes in in stone disease, acute cholecystitis and choledocholitis are important. Other than that, choledochal cyst, Mirizi syndrome, worm in the biliary tree, and iatrogenic injury to the bile duct injury are also important causes. Among malignant causes, carcinoma of the gallbladder, cholangiocarcinoma, and periampullary carcinoma usually present with, may or may not present with obstructive jaundice. Management has already been covered by my fellow colleagues. Management is to be done under the headings of investigations, medical management of pre-op optimization, and then coming to the definitive management. The medical management of optimization consists of adequate hydration to prevent hypotenuse syndrome, oral and IV antibiotics to tackle cholangitis, ursodeoxycholic acid, vitamin K injection to normalize any coagulation disorders, and lactulose to improve intrahepatic circulation of bile salts and also prevent hepatic encephalopathy, and also optimize nutrition of the patients. Now coming to the specific topics which are encountered usually. Acute cholecystitis may have obstructive jaundice as a component due to edema of the gallbladder wall, which may compress the bile duct, leading to a transient cholestatic jaundice. The management comprises of conservative management for acute cholecystitis, the control of infection and inflammation. With the reduction in the gallbladder edema and decrease in inflammation, the jaundice usually subsides. However, all cases must undergo an MRCP to detect any migrated stones in the bile ducts. Now coming to choledocholitis, it is the most common cause of obstructive jaundice. Among investigations on the liver function test, we have to do bilirubin total, direct and indirect all, serum proteins, albumin, globulin, liver enzymes, AST, ALT, ALP, GGT, and PTINR. Indirect hyperglobulinemia, direct hyperglobulinemia, hyperbilirubinemia will be present. In long-standing cases, liver enzymes may be elevated. And USG may demonstrate gallstones along with CBD stones and dilated CBD more than 7 mm and intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. MRCP may show filling defects in the CBD along with intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation. The treatment depends upon whether the patient is in cholangitis or not. In the absence of cholangitis, the gold standard is ERCP, followed by laparoscopic cholecystectomy. In ERCP, the steps are first we have to do an endoscopic papillotomy followed by stone extraction. A stent may or may not be deployed. In case of large stones, lithotripsy may be done to break down the large stone, followed by cholecystectomy afterwards. In case of failure of this ERCP followed by laparoscopic cholecystectomy, a laparoscopic or open CBD exploration has to be done, followed by primary repair or repair over T-tube or a bilioenteric anastomosis. The primary repair should only be done after confirming distal clearance by intraoperative cholangiogram, and repair over T-tube has to be done in cases where distal clearance is not confirmed or achieved. And a bilioenteric anastomosis has to be done for recurrent stones and in cases where the bile duct is adequately dilated. In the presence of cholangitis, the mainstay of treatment is conservative management with IV fluids and antibiotics. And ERCP with sphincterotomy and stone extraction or stent placement decompression has to be done. PTPT has to be done in ERCP failed cases, and surgical decompression over a T-tube has to be only be attempted when the above two procedures have failed. Now coming to missed or retained or residual stones versus recurrent stones. Stones detected within 2 years of intervention are defined as missed or retained or residual stones. They can be managed depending upon whether a T-tube is present or not. If a T-tube is present, the patient can undergo contact dissolution or Burhin technique by which a choledocoscope may be introduced to the mature tract and the stone may be extracted. If the T-tube is absent, an ERCP stone removal has to be attempted, or else a re-exploration has to be done minimum of 6 weeks from the primary surgery. In case of recurrent stones, which are they are defined as stones detected more than 2 years from the intervention, ERCP is the first line of approach, and open CBD exploration with bilioenteric bypass has to be done if it fails. In this case, a choledochoduodenostomy is often done. Now coming to the next cause, choledochal cyst. The investigations are the same as discussed earlier. In imaging, the USG will show dilated CBD without any intrahepatic biliary radical dilation, and the same can be delineated with the MRCP. MRCP provides excellent delineation of the biliary tract and hence helps in classification of the type of choledochal cyst. The classification is given by Todani. Type 1 classification is type 1 choledochal cyst is fusiform dilatation of the CBD. Type 2 is saccular dilatation of the CBD. Type 3 is a choledococele, and type 4 has been divided into type 4A and 4B. In 4A, both intrahepatic and extrahepatic cystic lesions are present, and in 4B, extrahepatic cystic lesions are present. And in 5 is multiple cystic lesions, hepatic, which is also known as Carolese disease. The treatment of choledochal cyst is primarily surgical and depends upon the type of choledochal cyst, which is delineated on MRCP. A type 1 choledochal cyst warrants complete excision of the cyst with Roux-en-Y hepaticojejunostomy plus cholecystectomy. Type 2 choledochal cyst warrants excision of the cyst with Roux-en-Y hepaticojejunostomy. In a type 3 choledochal cyst, a transduodenal sphincterotomy or sphincteroplasty is done. In case of a very large cyst, a transduodenal cyst excision can also be attempted. In type 4A, the extrahepatic cysts are treated with excision and Roux-en-Y HJ, and the intrahepatic part may be managed with a partial hepatectomy if the cysts are involved in only one lobe. For type 4B cyst, excision of the cyst with Roux-en-Y HJ has to be done. In case the confluence is excised, the right and left hepatic ducts may be separately anastomosed with the limb of jejunum. For a type 5 disease, Carolese disease, involving only one lobe of liver, a hepatectomy can be done. But in case of diffuse disease, liver transplantation is the only option. Now, coming to Medici syndrome, it is a complication of gallstone disease and a common presentation. USG will show a contracted GB with stone impact at the neck or Hartmann's pouch, dilated CBD with intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation, and a normal diameter CBD. An MRCP may show an impacted stone at the gallbladder neck with intrahepatic biliary radical dilation and dilated common hepatic duct. The treatment of Medici syndrome also depends upon the type of Medici syndrome. Type 1 Medici syndrome is external compression of the common hepatic duct due to stone impact at the neck of gallbladder or at the cystic duct. Type 2 is a cholecystocholedochal fistula involving less than 1/3 of the circumference of common bile duct. Type 3 is the same, involving between 1/3 and 2/3 of the circumference. Type 4 is complete destruction of the entire wall of common bile duct, and type 5 is a cholecystoenteric fistula together with any other type of Medici syndrome. The mainstay of treatment of Medici syndrome is cholecystectomy. A patient may require repair of the common hepatic duct in case of a cholecystocholedochal fistula. In case of very large fistula, a bilioenteric anastomosis may have to be done. For type 5 Medici syndrome without gallstone ileus, a simple closure of the fistula tract with treatment of the gallbladder as per the type of Medici syndrome has to be done. But in case of type 5 Medici syndrome with gallstone ileus, the management of the gallstone ileus has to be done first, and the management of the gallbladder stone has to be done at a later time according to the type of Medici syndrome. Now coming to worm in biliary tree, worms usually enter via the ampulla of Vater. They are usually Ascaris lumbricoides, and endoscopic sphincterotomy with bile duct clearance along with antihelminthic pharmacotherapy are the mainstay of treatment. Rarely surgical exploration may be required in case of failure of the above therapy. Coming to the iatrogenic causes of obstructive jaundice, iatrogenic causes may be divided into stent-related complications such as stenolith or stent dysfunction leading to obstructive jaundice, acute bile duct injury leading to biloma formation, or benign biliary stricture following surgery. Management of acute bile duct injury. Most acute bile duct injury present as bilious drain content in postoperative day 2 and further, but in case no drain was put or no apparent injury was noted during surgery, a biloma may develop which can cause pressure effect on the extrahepatic biliary radical and thus result in autophagic jaundice. Treatment of such bile duct injury involves percutaneous drainage of the biloma, which may lead to resolution of the jaundice. The most common classification that is followed for the management of bile duct injury is the Strasbourg's classification. Strasbourg classification A is the cystic duct blowout or leak from minor ducts of Luschka and the liver bed. In such cases, drainage of the bile by percutaneous catheter drain or an endoscopic nasobiliary drain and endoscopic stenting of CVD can be done. Strasbourg type B is injury to aberrant right duct, which is occluded, that is slipped. Such patients may remain asymptomatic or may also present with recurrent cholangitis and delayed atrophy of part of the liver. Symptomatic patients require percutaneous transhepatic biliary drainage, repair of the injured segment, or resection of the part of liver. Strasbourg type C is injury to aberrant right duct, which is open, leading to bile leak. Isotope hepatobiliary scintigraphy in such cases show extrabiliary isotope activity. Drainage of the bile by PCT has to be done, or PTT or PTPD of the isolated bile duct has to be done for drainage of the obstructed bile. Strasbourg type D is lateral injury to the CHD or CBD involving less than half the circumference. Drainage of the collected bile by PCD and endoscopic stenting of CBD has to be done. Strasbourg type E can be divided into E1, E2, E3, E4, and E5. E1 is injury occurring more than 2 centimeters from the confluence, and E2 is injury occurring less than 2 centimeters from the confluence, and E3 is injury at the hilum with preserved biliary confluence. E4 is injury at the hilum with involvement of the confluence, and E5 is pictured injury to aberrant right hepatic artery and or the common hepatic artery. In such cases, conservative management of biliary drainage by PCD has to be done, followed by approach similar to benign biliary stricture. Similarly, in benign biliary stricture, Bismuth classification is used. It is also classified into 5 types. Bismuth type 1 is CHD stricture with a stump more than 2 centimeters, that is from the confluence. Bismuth type 2 is CHD stricture with stump less than 2 centimeters from confluence. Bismuth type 3 is hilar stricture with preserved biliary confluence, and type 4 is hilar stricture with involvement of the confluence, and type 5 is stricture to aberrant right hepatic artery along with or without the common hepatic duct. In such cases, prior to surgical management, medical management is of utmost importance. Following medical management, surgical management involves creation of a bilioenteric bypass. Now, coming to the malignancy cases, carcinoma gallbladder may present with obstructive jaundice. The causes of obstructive jaundice in malignancy of gallbladder may be obstruction by lymph nodes in the porta or extension of the mass directly to the CHD or CBD. Apart from routine investigations, imaging may be suspicious of gallbladder malignancy. USG may show irregular wall thickening, a mass or a growth along associated with gallbladder stones, intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation along with lymphadenopathy. Triphysic CCT whole abdomen provides excellent delineation. It may show a heterogeneous mass with contrast enhancement, lymph node status, liver invasion, or metastasis. MRCP may show the site of obstruction of the biliary tree. Usually, the presence of obstructive jaundice is indicative of an advanced disease in carcinoma of gallbladder. Such patients usually have distant metastasis also, but in the absence of a distant metastasis, a radical cholecystectomy with lymph node clearance and excision of the involved bile duct, followed by bilioenteric anastomosis, may be done to achieve negative resection margin. In advanced or metastatic disease, a palliative therapy to reduce the jaundice, such as ERCP stenting or PTPD, is often necessary. It is important to note that there is no role of debulking or palliative resection in metastatic carcinoma of gallbladder. This is the recommended treatment according to the T stage of gallbladder malignancy. From stage 1B onwards, the chance of bile duct excision increases. In stage 1B and 2, bile duct excision has to be done if the cystic duct stump comes out to be positive in frozen section biopsy. In stage 3, the likelihood of bile duct excision and major hepatectomy increases. And stage 4 diseases are generally unresectable due to invasion of the hilar vascular structures. Now coming to pancreatic head cancer, 60% of all pancreatic adenocarcinomas occur in the head. Apart from the routine investigations for obstructive jaundice, we have to do CA19-9, which is usually elevated in pancreatic head cancer. USG may show a hypoechoic mass and a double duct sign. Triphysic CCT whole abdomen, which may show a poorly defined mass, which is hypotense on arterial phase and isodense on delayed scan. Relation with the SMA and celiac axis can be delineated on triphysic CCT whole abdomen. MRCP may show a double duct sign, and EUS provides information on operability, lymph node status, and arterial involvement. This is a TNM classification of pancreatic cancer according to AJCC 8th edition. It is important to note that a T4 disease is an advanced disease which involves the celiac axis, superior mesenteric artery, and the common hepatic artery, regardless of the size of the lesion. And an M1 lesion is a distant metastatic lesion. Now, treatment. Pancreatectomy is the procedure of choice for pancreatic head cancer, but it can only be done in stage 1A to stage 1B. Stage 3 disease patients are not candidates for immediate surgery. Some patients are to be classified as borderline resectable patients, and the criteria for a borderline resectable lesion is SMV or portal impingement more than 180 degree, and 180 degree less than 180 degree abutment of the superior mesenteric artery, abutment or encasement of the common hepatic artery, and a short segment occlusion of the superior mesenteric vein. The management of borderline resectable and non-resectable pancreatic head carcinoma can be given by the following flow diagram. For borderline resectable non-metastatic pancreatic head cancer, we can go for a neoadjuvant chemotherapy or chemoradiotherapy. If the disease is responding, then we can go for surgical exploration by pancreatic duodenectomy with the therapeutic goal of R0 resection, followed by adjuvant chemotherapy. In case of non-resectable non-metastatic pancreatic cancer, we should first go for an induction chemotherapy. If the disease is responding, then we can go for chemoradiotherapy, following which we should evaluate for resectability and go for a therapeutic R0 resection if feasible. Otherwise, continue for chemotherapy and wait for response. Biliary drainage procedures such as ERCP stenting or PTBD can be done for inoperable cases along with palliative chemotherapy. Now coming to ampullary carcinoma, prognostic markers such as CA19-9 and CA have to be done. In ampullary carcinoma, they may be usually elevated. USG in ampullary carcinoma doesn't usually show the tumor. They may only show intrahepatic biliary radical dilatation and dilated CBD. Triphasic CECD whole abdomen also usually does not show the lesion. It may only show distant metastasis or lymph node status. A side viewing endoscopy with ERCP gives excellent information on the tumor. It may help in identification of the tumor, may help in taking a biopsy, and may also help in decompression if needed. The treatment for localized disease is surgical excision by pancreatic duodenectomy with intent of R0 resection. In case of metastatic disease, palliative chemotherapy with ERCP stenting or PTBD has to be done for biliary decompression. Now coming to cholangiocarcinoma, carcinoma of the extrahepatic biliary tree. They can be divided, previously they were divided into perihilar, interhepatic and distal according to the which part of the bile duct they were occurring. Now they have been divided into only proximal and distal. Among proximal, both perihilar and intrahepatic have been included. Now it's cholangiocarcinoma is a rare disease, but it has a dismal prognosis. Apart from the routine investigations for obstructive jaundice, a triphasic CCT has to be done to localize the lesion, to see any presence of metastatic disease and evaluate for resectability. There is no role for tissue diagnosis for operable patients. Tissue diagnosis has to be done only for patients who need to undergo palliative chemotherapy or radiotherapy. In distal cholangiocarcinoma, pancreatic duodenectomy is the surgical procedure of choice with intrahepatic frozen section of the proximal bile duct margin to ensure a R0 resection. Absence of R0 resection decreases the long-term survival considerably. Proximal cholangiocarcinoma can be managed by resection of the regional nodal tissue and en bloc resection of the common bile duct along with hepatic parenchyma as necessary to achieve an R0 resection. Palliation of jaundice is to be done only in unresectable diseases. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Snehashish, you have given an overview of management of different situations of obstructive jaundice. Adequately covered. But once you go to the CBD stone, you said if ERCP fails, next is open, but always keep a possibility of lab. Okay. So once
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
ERCP fails, it's either lab. Next slide. You just said only open, but it's now a feasible option for.
Yes, okay.
will approach with CVD exploration. Okay. Otherwise, you have covered this topic very well.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So it's difficult to cover everything,
Okay,
but a brief outline about this management. Okay. Yes, we are overshooting time. If there is any other question, no question, anything, chat box, no. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Snehashish. Thank you, Anish. Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Revant.
Thank you, sir.